Well, hello everyone. Welcome back. I hope that was a super amazing and tremendous discussion that you were all a part of. I really hope it was energizing. I really hope that everyone had an open mind and an open heart when we were discussing some of these things. So I was asked to kind of help refresh or kind of help us level out some definitions about what we're discussing today, right? And as we know, based on the title of the book and based on the title of this event, we're talking about white supremacy today. A really sticky and really difficult topic to have, but I want us all to kind of be on the same page on how we're defining white supremacy. So in the book that we read today on the origins of white supremacy in California, Tomas Almaguer actually gives us a working definition from George Fredrickson, who, as I mentioned, is a sociologist of race. And so let me just quickly read it. The definition that he gives us is that white supremacy is the attitudes, ideologies, and politics associated with blatant forms of white or European dominance over non-white populations. A great definition, a really helpful definition when we think about white supremacy. But of course, as I mentioned, I do want us to complicate that definition for ourselves a little bit more, because oftentimes we can get stuck on what we mean by ideology or what we mean by attitudes. Generally, we have some kind of vague notion of what white supremacy is, even before you read the book or even before you really got into what race and race studies is. But we always get stuck on the idea that white supremacy is something that's just enacted as an idea. It is just an individual's idea. It is just some fringe group's thoughts about how white people are superior and deserve to be at the top of the racial hierarchy. But I want us to expand that more, right? It's not just attitudes, it's not just ideas. Sometimes this can also be enacted through laws, through court decisions, through policies, through how we behave in our everyday, through how we even occupy space and how we talk to people in the everyday, right? It's not just a fringe idea, but it is a structural idea. But two things that I do want to clarify as we talk about white supremacy as a structural concept is the concepts of race, racialization, and the concepts of whiteness. So at the very basic level, if you know nothing about race, there's one thing that you should understand immediately. Race is a social construct. It's something we made up. There's actually no real way to tangibly grab onto race and say, hey, this is what it is. There's no easy way to be able to pinpoint it because it's always changing. Race is something we've, as a society, have made up, right? We have all different kinds of ideas of what race is, and a lot of it is based on conversations that we had, personal experiences, histories that we read, places where we lived, movies, books. It's in our culture, it's in our music, and it all ascribes a particular idea of what race is. And in turn, we also ascribe ideas of what race is onto these things, right? It's a weird little cycle. But point is, we've made it up, right? There's no actual tangible way to say this is what race is. It's something we socially constructed. And so racialization is that process in which we've ascribed meaning onto a group of people. We've ascribed these racial meanings. The second concept we have to understand is whiteness, right? And so I really like George Lipshitz's definition of whiteness, where he says that whiteness is not so much a color as much as it is a condition, a structured advantage sustained by past and present forms of exclusion and subordination. So not white people necessarily, but it is a condition, right? It is a structure in which people are given advantage to include or exclude people, right? It is a condition, a structure, a setting where you can be that entitles you to be able to say, no, I'm going to create laws to exclude someone, or you know what, in this situation, I will include this particular population as a part of whiteness because it advantages me, right? And so I'm sure in your discussions you had a much more detailed conversation about what whiteness sometimes looked like in different parts of time and in different parts of California. And so there's much more we can get into, but to give you all time to discuss, we just want to think about whiteness not just as an idea, but as how it manifests structurally. Okay? Hopefully that kind of clarified some things. And so now I really do want to hear more about what you all said, right? About what you all discussed in terms of the book. So I know that you were all broken up into different groups, and I would love to hear a little bit from each group about what they were able to discuss together. So why don't we just start with group one?
So right now we started live stream. I just want to say hello to everyone online. We are doing group discussions and doing an share out. Sorry, my bad. It's doing a share out for folks to know about what we discussed.
Thank you. Oh, what? Oh, in the middle. So our group, we discussed chapter 1, sort of how the different concepts of free labor, manifest destiny, and Christianity in terms of, what was framed as civility, kind of built out that we're thinking about that in terms of, the structural formation of America and in California. We touched on, well, first of all, one of the important points that was brought up is that instead of talking about slavery in the terms of slavery, really using the word enslavement to really capture the, to not distance slavery, to not distance what happened to Black folks as being actively enslaved, like the passivity versus kind of taking responsibility and acknowledgement of like enslavement as a concept instead of the word slavery. So that was a really salient point. And just talking about what white supremacy, means to us and how we define it, system of protection and privilege that affects people in all social settings, in education, sex, religion, politics, and that acknowledging that not everyone in America has the same history, that, for example, saying that we're a country of immigrants denies other folks' histories and experience of enslavement, of disenfranchisement, of violence, and et cetera. Yeah, it was a great conversation. It was short. We had a lot to talk about. Sorry. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. If I can get the speaker, yeah, let's go ahead. If I could get the speakers for each group to kind of line up here for us so we can kind of transition in a smooth way. But that was such an amazing example that you brought up, and I think I may have slipped up in the earlier discussion, and I used the word slavery as opposed to enslavement. And it's a really great way for us to also see how even our everyday language is also a part of white supremacy, right? Our everyday language can help absolve a particular group in history that did the enslaving. So thank you so much for bringing that up. That was such an amazing conversation. Okay, so group number 2. Woo.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So the question that we had, or we didn't get through all of our questions, but we had such a fruitful discussion. It was around chapter 2, and the question that we did speak about was how did white supremacy kind of frame the Mexican experience in the 19th century? And so some of the things that were talked about was just the use of land and how that was used to kind of segregate people based on class, right? There was different, like lateral oppression per se. So they were breaking people down into like different categories of people. If you had a little bit of land or you looked a little bit more like a white person, you might have a little bit more privilege or access to tracts of land that you would get darker people to work for you, right? We also talked about the use of religion and how that was a tool that was imposed on people. Obviously, it had been done generations before, but how that was also actively a part of the mechanism of, keeping people divided so that it makes it easier to take resources and use them, for free, right? The last thing that I will say was just talking about the historical context that led to California's kind of role in how like white supremacy kind of played out with the broken treaties and the illegal sale of the 7 states that make up the Southwest into what we now know as California, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, and so on and so forth. But I will keep it brief. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Oh, let's. All right, group 3.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julia, and I'm representing Group 3 and Chapter 3. We talked about, in Chapter 3, how land was stolen from rancheros and how they were able to do that. And we discussed that they were able to do that by creating debt, showing documentation, forms and things that Anglo-Saxon white folks created. They made up. And they said, see, I have this deed. Oh, you can't read? Oh, you don't know what this says? Oh, you're not part of our community then, clearly. And you must be a savage. So they used the fact that they could not speak English or didn't speak the language against them. So we also tried to talk about how do we see that so prevalent today, still going on today. And thankfully for Supervisor Holly Mitchell, Bruce's breach has been restored to its rightful owners. So another way is redlining and the banking. So we had a wonderful conversation. We did not have enough time. We need to make this normal that we have these conversations, and that's my time.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jorge Partida, and I represent Chapter 4. We had a discussion, and the chapter focuses on the relationship of white people to Native people here in California. And the author, first of all, starts off by warning us that it's a sort of a very black and white way of looking at how natives were treated, but basically uses the idea that because they wore very little clothing and because they were not Christian, they were seen as savages. The labeling of natives as savages allowed the white Europeans to treat them as such. I think it's also important for us to recognize that, as I suggest, that part of the treatment of natives here in Alta California versus Baja California is also the relationship that they had to Mexico. In Mexico, there really is not that much distinction in the native folks, but what we have to understand is that the relationship of white people in California to the natives really kind of skips the whole history of colonizers coming into Mexico and really trying to win populations over in order to not exterminate entire populations. So that crash, cultural crash, was much more obvious in California than in Baja California and other parts of Mexico. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So group 5. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Delana Walker, representing Group 5, Chapter 5. Yes, thank you. So we had a very, very interesting discussion. I work for a youth development program. So when you hear young people say, that will never happen here, that only happens in the South, and then you sit in these groups and you hear stuff that came from the South that's been embedded here in the West, that kind of still lies underneath the blanket. It just tells me that we have a lot of work to do with our young people, and they are not informed. So what we talked about was free labor and how this free labor kind of became just a practice, a regular system, kind of embedded into laws once California became a state. And how some of the current policies parallel with the cash bail system. You were able, if you were a person who was jobless or homeless, you were put in jail, I guess. You were captured, you were put in jail, and people were able, whoever worked on these farms or in different systems or had the means, if they paid your bail, you basically became ownership to them until you were able to pay them back. So that was just another way to obtain free labor. And then we just talked a lot about how the incorporated areas in LA County, how it kind of parallels with some of the stuff that was happening back then. So definitely a very interesting discussion, and I hope we could do more of this, Supervisor Mitchell, because it's definitely needed. So yeah, thank you.
So group number 6.
Good afternoon. My name is Katrina Love, and I'm the Division Chief of Community and Marketing Services with LA County Department of Beaches and Harbors. And my group focused on Chapter 6, and basically it talked about the first arrival of the Chinese in California. So basically they were kind of paired against Native Americans. They were considered as non-Christian. They were heathens. They weren't sophisticated. So they were really thought of in a very dehumanizing way. And when the first wave came over, it was mostly men. And when the women came over, they were basically prostitutes. When you talk about labor, it was a major issue because they were exploited. They worked for less wages, and they often broke the strike lines. So that was basically what we talked about. Group, did I miss anything? Thank you.
Okay, so last group, I believe, group 7.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Williams. I'm a District 2 Commissioner for the Economy and Efficiency Commission, representing Group 7. In Chapter 7 was a synopsis of a case study in Oxnard where it focused on the Japanese-Mexican Labor Association's attempt at coming together and collaborating for more preferable working conditions and wages against the Anglo-European folks who were kind of working against that. In addition to that, our group kind of spoke about the book in general and the concept of whiteness as a construct that can be weaponized by non-white people as well. We were really struck by the use of the tax system within this chapter as a mechanism of welfare for white folks at the time against non-white people. We were also struck by really the regional brands and different regional brands of white supremacy. The last thing I'll say is we really had questions of the future around what can we do to build more multiracial labor collaborative opportunities as we look to rebuild and heal in Los Angeles County.
Hello, everybody. Rafael Carvajal, part of Group 7. I was asked to share. One of the things that this book did for me, was provide some life context. Growing up, my father and my grandfather came from Mexico to California during the Bracero program. They worked up in the Central Valley picking flowers and fruit. In the Central Valley, my father actually developed a relationship with the Japanese owner of the farm. The owner ended up moving down here to Gardena, where we still see a lot of Japanese enclaves there and a lot of nurseries. He brought my father with him. When he brought him over, he taught my father that he was able to become a contractor and a gardener, helped him get his contractor's license, and through that, he was able to provide for my family and give us the opportunities that we have. So I'm grateful for this opportunity to provide some context to the things that I was living on in everyday life without really understanding some of the background behind it. And then also, I want to big up everything that's already been said by all the other groups too.
Great. So, I mean, I'm so excited to hear all of the feedback that people, all the discussions that people had. And I think as a member of the district, I'm really excited to see that all of you are making personal connections, but also thinking about how to implement some of these ideas in everyday work and to how to continue these conversations outside of just this building, right? How do we continue to talk about how white supremacy is being upheld? How do we talk about the legacy of white supremacy that we saw initially established in California that unfortunately, for the most part, we still kind of stand on top of, right? How do we address what's happened in the past and address what continues to happen in California? So I'm super excited to see everyone engaging in these conversations and being so willing to want to talk about it even after this event. So thank you all so much for that.
All right, I echo everything Michelle said. Thank you. That was wonderful to hear everybody's feedback. My name is Jessalyn Waldron. I am a Constituent Services Deputy for Supervisor Mitchell. I represent the beach cities, or the coastal area of the 2nd District. So the next segment, we spent a lot of time talking about the history of the white supremacy in California. We're going to talk about modern-day white supremacy. So I'm going to introduce you to our next segment. Just a few quick reminders. This will be a challenging conversation. I encourage you to be open-minded and challenge yourself to listen. But if you are triggered, please do take care of yourself. There is the safe space outside. We have snacks and water. So just to offer that. It may not be suitable for little ears. Also, just a warning that it will be a very adult conversation. And with that, I would like to introduce Supervisor Holly Mitchell, and our guest Frank Meeink is a activist, police reformer, and author of autobiography of a recovering skinhead. He's a former white supremacist and does work to bring social justice and police reform work to the systems and everything that we've been talking about. So hopefully this will carry us into action items into your work.
So good afternoon, happy holidays, and welcome everybody. I appreciate you coming. If we didn't tell you, we're filming today, the county channel, because we think these conversations and your effort around this work is so important. We want to make sure it's spread far and wide. So thank you for coming and for your participation. Jessalyn, I think I'm going to have to disagree with you on one point. I think there are no ears too young to have this conversation. I just have to tell you. Miss Sloan, I think, was our youngest. I don't see Miss Sloan. Maybe they left because it may not be particularly intriguing for a 5-year-old Miss Sloan. I get that. But I think, the impact white supremacy has on all of us doesn't start at a certain age. And so we have to have conversations with every family member, I think young and old. So I hope that you all will take what you learned back with others. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jessalyn. Thank you, Michelle, for leading us in our initial effort. I was sitting there having side conversations with Frederica McGee, our chief of staff, and she said, these are perfect cliff notes for the book, the report back. I said, yes. So for folks who are watching who haven't read it, those here with us who haven't read it, I hope that encouraged you to read it, because the book, while it's a hard read, I'll confess, it's a hard read, hard in the concept of challenging, but it's chock full of valuable history and information that I think gives us important context. Again, thank you, County Channel. Thank you, Park and Rec, for hosting us today. I am so intrigued and looking forward to this conversation. So I appreciate your willingness to be here and your willingness to engage in this conversation with us.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Tell us about your initial impressions of the book.
My first impression of the book, actually our speaker, I think Jen was talking about it. When I was starting to read some of the stuff about the tax breaks that they would give to white people, for every little reason, I kept thinking, and now all of a sudden we complain about affirmative action, right? Oh. But what was that back then, right? It was always this little favoritism, but it's okay when it's our way, right? It's always okay when it's our way. And, that was one of the, and then also there was the things where we have the police, or at the time they would go around and after sundown, they go around and they grab anyone that they thought was either intoxicated.
Yeah, if you lived in a sundowner town,
yeah,
yes.
And then the next day to auction them off. And, this was still happening. And so, I guess my thought of it reading more about California, and I'm not a California native. I'm actually new to California. So it was intriguing to me just to read how the gold rush for some, wasn't the gold rush for everybody else. You know what I mean? And it's so funny when we get here. It's like if I walked in this room right now and was like, hey, look, you're already over here. And I go, look, I just discovered this room. Right? But you're all just sitting right here. You know, I just discovered it. Because you don't believe what I believe, so I discovered it for all the other people to believe what I believe. And that's, you know.
It's an important part of history we should remember. So, can we talk about you?
Let's talk about me. I'm not much, but I'm all I think about.
Oh, I like that. I'm not much, but I'm all I think about.
Let's go.
When I use that line, I might give you credit. So, thank you for your willingness to be transparent and open. So walk us through your journey.
Okay.
Your life as a white supremacist theology believer.
Okay.
How did it start with you? And then how did you begin to transition out of that way of thinking?
Okay. So I'll take you all back to the 80s, 1988. All right, parents are drug addicts and drug dealers and live in Philly. And, you know, my dad had a bar in Philly, and it wasn't always sunny at that bar. Pretty rough neighborhood, and kind of fended for myself for a long time, and got changed in the middle of my, when I was going from 13, my mom and my stepdad kicked me out of their house and made me go move with my dad. And my dad lives up in southwest West Philly, and he's all heard of West Philly. And West Philly, born and raised, where I spent most of my days, chilling out, relaxing, shooting some b-ball out by the schoolyard, right? I can go on with Will Smith. Well, I moved into that same neighborhood that he rapped about leaving and coming to Beverly Hills for. It's where my dad's neighborhood, and that's why I went to this all-black school, and there was not 20%, there was just 20 of us that went to that school, and it was hard. And to tell you, I went from abusive parents who didn't pay no mind to me. You know what I mean? My dad did his dealings, and that's life. Mm-hmm. And when I came home with a black eye, I should have probably protected myself better, he would say. You know, it wasn't like, how are you doing? Mm-hmm. Are you okay? I was always in sports and never said, hey, how's sports going? My parents just didn't have that time for me. Mm-hmm. And so that's this year I'm going to this all-black school. I'm getting in a lot of fistfights. That summer I got to go to Lancaster, Pennsylvania to get out of the city for the summer with my uncle and my cousins. And my cousin was involved in this stuff. Now, up in, Lancaster, Pennsylvania is like the hub of the Amish. Like, that's their turf. You want to talk about gang turf? That's the Amish gang turf up there. And they really live that way. Like, they really turn butter. They don't wait for us to come around and go, let's reenact turning butter. They really turn butter. And, I mean, that stuff to me was fascinating. And my cousin was kind of getting involved with this group, with all these other neo-Nazis. And now I'm this young kid that lives in the city. And all these big farm boy neo-Nazis would come around. And they'd always ask me, like, what's it like? What's it really like to be around black people? You know, and because they didn't know. And I remember there was this one girl, because we always had like the queen bee girl that hung out, you know what I mean? She didn't like other girls. So yeah. You know, I don't get along with them, so I hang out with the dudes. Well, we had this one, and she was gorgeous, so she could do whatever she wants. And she came up to me and kind of fronted me one day in front of everyone. Now, I'm young to these guys. They're 16, 17. I'm a 13-year-old little skateboarder, punk rock kid hanging out with all these neo-Nazi skinheads. And she stood above me one day and was like, so you're going to tell me you take the bus with black people every day? Now, she probably didn't say the word black, right? But I remember being like, yeah, I got to take the L train through West Philly every day. Of course I take the bus with black people every day. And now I remember in my life, if I would have switched that around, imagine if I stood above her and been like, so you see Amish people every day, right? Because it's perspective of living. Yes. And so anyway, I enjoy being around. I was like their little encyclopedia of urban stuff. Whenever these farm boys would be like, is it really like that? And I'd be like, it's really like that. But it gave me attention. It gave me some attention. People were actually asking me, how's my life? You know, just like they're asking about my neighborhood, but to me they were saying, Frank, how's life? Because my parents didn't ask me these questions. And I loved being around them. And then the second part of that was when I started to hang out with them. Look, my parents were abusive, my stepdad especially. I went to school that was very abusive. When I was hanging out with these guys, these neo-Nazis, and they go to the nightclubs, nobody messed with them. Even though I had the little skater haircut and I wasn't shaved bald like they were yet, people feared me. And I loved it. I loved that. Because up until that point in my life, I feared everything. I feared my school. I feared my parents. I feared my step-parents. I feared if I was going to have freaking food to eat today sometimes. Now somebody fears me. And that I loved. And so when I said I would join, was this one night after this concert hall, they asked me if I would shave my head. And I kind of got the black-white thing down. You know, I was fist fighting with these kids. I got that, you know. And then they started talking about, like, the Jews. Now, didn't know any Jews. There was no Jews where I grew up in South Philly. But I would hear things like from people that would say, when I go to the store, hey, Johnny tries to Jew me. Like if someone didn't give you the right change back, right? Johnny tried to Jew me. And everybody in my neighborhood would laugh. Ha, you know, Johnny, he's always trying to Jew somebody. And I never got the joke when I was a kid. And I'm a funny person, so I like knowing the joke. And I asked my uncle, why does everyone laugh at that joke? And he started to tell me one day, he goes, well, see, Frank, the Jews, they're kind of notorious for money. And he's like, you know what, Frank? You'll get the joke when you're older. It's a funny joke. You'll get it when you're older. When I'm at my first neo-Nazi, like, real get-together, I join, now I go to, like, their first little rally. The first man starts talking about how the Jews secretly take money from the Federal Reserve. Now, mind you, I'm a 14-year-old. Don't know nothing about the Federal Reserve. You know what I mean? I'm 40-something. I still don't know what the Federal Reserve does. It's bad news, right? But these guys are telling me that this Federal Reserve is secretly run by Israel and the Jews. And in the way that they talked, I got the joke. I got my uncle's joke. I must be older now. I understand what the adults know now. I get it. So I really bought into it. I wanted to know. Now just so you know, there's thousands of former white supremacists out there now doing a lot of good work. There's activists all over this country that were former white supremacists. And I love all their journeys, and we all have our own journey. But I'm going to tell you, I didn't get into this like some other people did where I just hated these people or I just wanted my parents to be mad. I got into this for survival. And I grabbed onto every word that was taught to me. And by the time I was high school age, I didn't go to high school anymore. I just went to the neo-Nazis. And I lived at their places up in the boondocks of Pennsylvania and shot guns and would learn things about being part of a race war. That's our only job, is every day is to prepare for this race war. And this was 1991. So as I got very active, involved, I'm all tattooed up. I mean, I was very active. I even had my own TV show, a cable access television show in Springfield, Illinois. By this time, I'm traveling around the country for the movement. Plus, I have warrants for my arrest, let's be honest. So I'm just running from state to state and popping up with different movements here and there. I'm honest. And I wound up getting caught up in a case, just so you guys know the truth. I went to prison at 17 in the state of Illinois. So I was in there in Chicago and East St. Louis. I kidnapped an Antifa member. And that was par for the course, guys. That was just, par for the course. And this time I got caught up. I mean, we had done this before, and that's our biggest adversaries in the white supremacist movement, is this anti-fascist movement. They are the biggest pains in the butt to the neo-Nazi world, just so you know. And we take that very seriously, and so I eventually kidnapped one of their guys out of central Illinois and went to prison. In prison, and this is where there's some correlations there. This is 1992. I go to prison, and I'm in there with a lot of young kids from Chicago, right? I'm a Philly kid. All the people that are in my Aryan gang, who I'm totally cool with my Aryan gang when I get there, but they're all bikers from central and southern Illinois. I never rode a Harley Davidson in my life. That's all they talk about. They could fix your transmission at 2 years old, but they don't know how to dribble a basketball. And see, I grew up in Philly playing sports my whole life, started playing sports with some of the guys. And look, they were just guys that were my age. They just happened to be from Southside Chicago, who we would talk about girls, because you can't talk to older inmates about your girl. When you talk to the other younger inmates, we're always like, your girl's going to wait for you. We just say the same thing back that I want to hear. But, your girl's going to wait for you, man. When I had my daughter, I had a daughter when I was in prison. By this time, I never left the neo-Nazi movement in prison. But I had a good enough friendship with a couple guys that when I first found out I had my daughter, I didn't run up to my older Aryans, again, who I hang with every day, along with my guys I play sports with. But I ran to G and Tony and Jello and guys and was like, yo, I had my kid. Because they were the first people I was trying to feel comfortable, because we always would back each other up. We played football and basketball together. So for a lot of people to think, well, why would the Aryans let you do that? Because they knew I'm not going to be egotistical. They knew I was good. Like, I'm really good at sports. And so I was kind of like this white guy, the great white hope here, you know what I mean? I could show up sometimes, and, I could dish the ball off, and I mean, I was really good. And I played basketball with the Aryans sometimes, so they've seen how good I was. They know I talk a lot of trash. I'm a city kid. I talk a lot of trash. And these guys are horrible at basketball, so it was easy to talk trash. And so, again, I started to make some good, lasting friendships, and just always kept that in the corner of my mind. So when I get released from prison, plus there was this kid named G, and G was a little bit younger than me. Now, I kidnapped a political, what you would call a political rival in a way, and I got 3 years. He sold crack and got 16. 16, and he was the same age as me. So I remember when I was getting out of prison, I was kind of like, it's a little stacked up, but it's, it's in my favor again. It's in my favor, right? I mean, nothing much. See, I'll tell you that when I was a neo-Nazi, I would wake up, and this goes with today's world, I would wake up and instantly think, what are they doing in my country? Why do they got BET? Why don't we have white entertainment television, right? Blah, blah, blah. Even though white entertainment television is a horrible acronym, and it would probably be more for an X-rated thing, but whatever. But I would wake up and I would instantly think about this stuff. Why? Why did they have this? I didn't have a silver spoon in my mouth. Why did they get affirmative action? And it was my constant thought in my head. Well, when I get released from prison, to make this fast forward a little bit, I'm kind of still around the neo-Nazi movement. I got all my clout. I got all my pull. I'm 19 years old, just getting out of prison. I got a big swastika tattooed on my neck. And, this is my life and my movement. But when I get back to Philly, when I got out of prison, I'm around this new crew that's coming around, and a lot of them are younger guys. And there was things in my head that I knew that just weren't right. But I was like, you know what? As long as I stay on the Jewish issue, because I was like kind of cool with the black Latino, I got this. Like, we're all due time, with life. But the Jews are it. So I'm trying to get a job, and as you guys know, if any of you know, if you've ever hired someone, I have a big swastika on my neck, right? So when I fill out job applications, these ain't good people skills, all right? And so finally a buddy of mine said he can get me a job doing antique furniture at an antique show in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Do I want the job? I needed the job. I needed money. He said he'd give me $100 a day. It's only a weekend. I go work for the guy. As soon as my buddy tells me, though, I'm going to take the job, he goes, but I got to tell you, the dude's a Jew. Do you still want the job? And I was like, I don't care. I don't got to talk to this guy, do I? I could just work. And he said, yeah, I told Keith Brookstein all about you, that you're, he's got out of prison, you're some neo-Nazi. He said he doesn't give a rat's ass what you believe, just don't break his furniture. And I showed up and I worked for this man. And all weekend long I worked, and I made tons of money in tips and had all this stuff lined up. But I still thought in the end he was not going to pay me my $300 because I made all this money in tips. Now, in my own anti-Semitic, ignorant way, and this is something that we all do, not be anti-Semitic, but you ever have that resentment at someone at work where you're like, you know what, that's it. Tomorrow I'm telling that person off. Like, if they say that same dumb stuff, I'm going to tell them off. And you think about the argument all night in your head, and as you're driving to work, and I hope he does say something to me today. I got something to say to him now, right? And so I was going to work waiting to think that this guy was not going to pay me my money because he knew I made so much money in tips. And so when he walked over to me, this Jewish man, he said, how much do I owe you? I said, $300. And he said, oh, yeah, that's right, $100 a day. And I had like $600 in tip money. And he said, well, here's one, here's two, here's 300. You're a really good worker. Here's an extra $100. And all I thought about, son of a gun, you've ruined my argument. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to fight. I was like a cat with a ball and a resentment, like, rawr. So this man says he's going to give me extra money. Then he offered to give me a ride home. When he gave me a ride home back to South Philly into my mom's neighborhood, he drives me and he says, what do you do for a living? And I said, I don't do anything. I got this big swastika on my neck. And he said, why don't you come work for me? And I went and worked for this man. And what he did to me, and we're still great friends to this day, is what he did was he didn't try to change me. But when I would do things like if I made a mistake, I always go, oh, I'm so stupid. You hear that a lot with kids. I'm so stupid. Oh, I'm so stupid. And I used to say that a lot. And one day I broke a marble top table, and I was like, Keith, I'm so embarrassed. I was embarrassed for him, embarrassed for me. And I just said, Keith, I'm so stupid. I'm so sorry. And he came over to me and he gripped me up by the back of my neck. And he said, stop saying you're stupid, you idiot. Clean it up and let's go. And we got in the car and he just unloaded on me. And one of the things about just the whole conversation, we were driving through New Jersey, which I know New Jersey's the Garden State, but it's more like Turnpike State. We're driving on the Turnpike and we're going home, and he just kind of unloaded on me. And he looked at me and he goes, Frank, Smart people can fake being dumb, but dumb people can't fake being smart. You just are, Frank. Accept it. And by this time, I've been working for this guy. I'm still kind of a neo-Nazi, and I'm like, this guy's a genius. Like, on other things, I was like, this guy's so smart. And when he kind of said that to me, and he dropped me off that day, I'm walking back to my mom's crib. I can feel it now. Like I was just, like, it overwhelmed me that I was wrong. Like, I'm consistently banging my head against the wall just to have this clout with these people, just to be part of this. I'm starting to trying to believe it, and I finally had hit the brick wall enough that I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm done. I walked back to my mom's, and I just took off my boots and took off anything I had that even resembled it anymore, and I just made this decision. I was like, I'm done. And anytime they were around somewhere, I didn't go. Like, I just avoided them. Now, I was blessed because I went back to my mom's old neighborhood, my old South Philly neighborhood. So I had tons of friends in that neighborhood and cousins. There's 1,000 cousins in my neighborhood. So then I just started to change my thought process. And I want to go real quick. There was times where I would drive around Philly, and I'd see a guy selling food stamps, a black dude selling food stamps, on the street corner, 50 cents on the dollar, 50 cents on the dollar. And I would say, well, see the move? And I go, wait a minute, my mom's always sold her food stamps. She just sells them out of her house. You know what I mean? Like, what's the difference? Where, like, an Asian woman cut me off, and I'd be like, and I'm like, wait a minute, my aunt, who's white, ran over a cow this year. Like, cows aren't deer. They don't jump in the way. It was already there when she got there, and she still hit it. So all right, that can happen. And I just could do that in my brain to where I just knew, like, I know someone that does that. On the last part of this, and the changing is, so I could tell you what changed me back then, and I could tell you what keeps continuing my fight for today, is that, look, 300 years from now, we're going to be one color. It's coming. It can't be stopped. We're going to be one tribe as we continually grow together. It's unstoppable. So there's racists use the replacement theory, which is something that is naturally going to happen here over time. So how do we get to that point? Do we get to the point the way I wanted to, with a race war and all this other, or do I accept that my job is to be a good human being on this planet and know that that is the final thing? We have big jobs by God. You know what I mean? Like, just so you know, America, and I'm not going to be this American, like, we've been given, like, things like the gift of recovery. You know that started in America? The gift of recovery for everyone was started in America off of the 21st Amendment. A lot of people don't know that. The 21st Amendment, which allowed us to start drinking again, which was due for 3 reasons. We were allowed to drink again. Government seen we can make money, the people wanted to drink, and because of police brutality on the speakeasies, especially, and we didn't say anything when it was happening in the black community, but once they started breaking up the speakeasies in the Irish and the Italian, they were like, whoa, this needs to stop. And right after the 21st Amendment, only 2 years later, this group called Alcoholics Anonymous was founded because of this 21st Amendment. Because as Americans, we're going to start fixing our own problems. We can fix the problems, right? So, anyway, I truly believe we have good things coming for us. This point that we're going through right now is something that's going to let us grow. We're going to get through this Trumpism and Fox Newsism. Because we didn't have that, and I was going to say that. We didn't have that when I was a neo-Nazi. We didn't have Fox News. Are you kidding me? I could only imagine what I would do with a Tucker Carlson speaking the same things I'm speaking, which he does. Says the same things I used to say.
And that is scary. That's what makes him so scary.
So go ahead. I'm sorry I talked for too long.
We are going to go over 4 o'clock. If you have to leave at 4 o'clock, then feel free to get up and leave. But this conversation is too deep just to arbitrarily stop at 4 o'clock. So I'm just letting you know. What my aha moment listening to you, my own implicit bias, as I listened to you describe your life circumstances that led you to a group of people who nurtured you and accepted you, embraced you, and provided for you, that's any gang or group. And I never thought about that in the context of neo-Nazis or skinheads. That never occurred to me. And so I appreciate you helping me chin check my own bias and how I made assumptions about that group of people. But that's how vulnerable people can be taken advantage of and brought into whatever group, because we're all looking to be supported, respected, affirmed.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
That was powerful for me. So we had a side conversation earlier about police reform. And so, and you educated me in terms of sharing that when you were an active neo-Nazi, that you all were encouraged to join law enforcement.
Absolutely.
So when we think about how we reform a system, we really are kind of starting here, where to truly radically reform a system, we have to go back a step or two in terms of really understanding its core origins, how it came to be the entity that it is. So talk to us about, given the history of patrolmen, going back to those who patrolled, those who were enslaved. Talk about police reform with your lens.
Yes. So, yes, in fact, if you ever want to Google this, there was actually an old neo-Nazi white supremacist music band out of Philadelphia, out of our clique, out of our group. And the name of the band, Arresting Officers. Now, some of them went on to become, in that band, became cops. One made it all the way up to the Department of Justice. And they knew his past. So what I would tell you is that we are told to join the military so that you can come home and join the police, because the police are the frontline soldiers of the race war. Now, as I look at policing now and how it's done, I couldn't imagine someone that had the beliefs that I had as pulling a black person out of their car at 10:30 at night. And I know that there's people that that believe the way I used to believe, who love doing that. They love being the ones that pull you over at 10:30 at night, make you get out of the car, embarrass you in front of your children, putting guns on you. So as I looked over this, and I got to testify in front of the United States Congress in 2020, on fellow people that I knew, 4 exactly, that became cops right out of my group alone. Just my group alone. 4. Let alone, this has been told by every group across the country to try to join your local police departments. Because if black people also get out of control, you give them a felony, because then they can't legally arm themselves, and you can't vote. Well, that's back then, you couldn't vote. They used to joke about this stuff. This was an ongoing joke. Yeah, you get them for resisting arrest, and get them for a felony. And everyone laughed, ha, 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 like, that was said. And they have and people have started to become cops. So when we talk about police reform, I mean, one of the things we need to do is kind of reinstate our 4th Amendment, so that we're not just able to be pulled out of cars anymore. Like, they should have never done this to us in the first place, but now that it's here, we have to readjust this plan of them pulling us over just to search our cars, because it's mostly used on other people, not people of my color. Now, don't get me wrong, they do it to poor whites too. I mean, they see that you're below that bar, they're going to do this. So I don't know if you guys know this, but we have 36% of the world's women's prison population, and we're only 3.9% of the world's population. And guys, it's not the upstate prisons anymore. It's the county jail system, which has doubled our numbers in prison. The beneficiaries of people being in county jails is the local sheriff's department, is the local police departments. They can get up to $190-something a day for an inmate in there. So they hold you for 4 or 5 days without your bail. They got paid. They got paid.
Today's LA Times has a powerful article about bail. I saw you read it, Booker. Anybody else who hasn't read it, be sure and read it. It's interesting. 2 questions about youth. How do we get youth who join gangs because they're looking for a family or belonging to listen to that voice in their heads that you had? And how can we have conversations, create ongoing education for teens to become more allies, stop racial slur use, and identify white supremacy language is toxic.
Okay, I'll take the latter of the question kind of first. So if you notice, like, where they're trying to ban a lot of books, it's because they know that people will read these and become activists. That's why they ban these books. You know, don't let them read these certain books, because then kids are going to go, oh, I want to stand for that. So what a better way then is to ban books that talk about activism, make you want to be part of something that's a solution in this world. So what we need to do is we have to keep reminding our youth that, like, we really are moving towards a bigger goal here in this country. We really are. And again, it doesn't matter how much you want to say. You know, it's so funny when I hear white people or anyone when they're like, I won't let my daughter marry outside their race. Okay, maybe you won't. And maybe she won't. Maybe she'll not look for love in all the right places just because of your racism. But guess who your grandchildren are bringing home? Guess who your great-grandchildren are bringing home? We can't.
Who's coming to dinner?
That's it.
For Christmas.
And guess what? They're bringing your son or their daughter to their family. So, I mean, it's like we have to keep telling and let our children know. I mean, we have rights. If we can educate, imagine how smart we would be if we start educating our kids on their real rights. Like, really. We should even start having courses about cops coming in and saying, look, we don't want to search your cars anymore, so can you do these things to make us safe? Show your hands in your car, whatever. But we need to start limiting the access. And I think the Gen Zs of today are amazing. And they're going to get it. They don't want this anymore. I mean, we really are starting to grow. And I'm just hoping that people like myself and others can still encourage them that, like, we have a bigger goal here. You know, this stuff that happened in California, it was bad, but now we can just fix today.
Right.
We can fix today.
And I think it's important, as I look at some of the questions, that people understand that this series, and it's a series, we do this monthly, it's called a Racial Justice Learning Exchange. There may be things Frank has said, or I say, or you read in the book that you disagree with. We all have the right. The point is hearing a perspective that's different from your own and factoring it in. And I hope that, you know, I think sometimes when you put a question forward in a setting like this, you kind of already know the answer. So I hope that you all, throughout the course of this next month, we're very likely be gathering with family, friends, and neighbors more often than we do throughout the course of the year, that you talk about your experience at the Racial Justice Learning Exchange, either today or if you've joined us previously. Because the point is, from my perspective, that these are conversation starters. We don't expect to have the answer. That's why we're coming together monthly, because we are continuing to learn and grow and expand our way of thinking. I had my deeply significant aha moment listening to you, and I hope throughout the course of the month since last February, we're almost coming up on a year, you've had deeply personal aha moments too to help you reframe and rethink your concept of race and whiteness. So again, we may not always have the answers. We're looking to you to think through the questions yourself and come up with solutions. Okay, Ed. I'm not sure that we're prepared to answer this one, but I'm gonna put it out there. How do we process the erasure of Black, Mexican, and Afro-Latinos in general within the lens of white supremacy and the Spanish caste system, and how do we fix it?
Oh.
Frank?
Oh. Jan, where'd my speaker go? Jan, where'd she go?
You know, I would start by saying, you know, colorism is real. Were you about to raise your hand? Like you have an answer? You would love to dabble with it? No, you go ahead. Let's hear you. Come on. Are you the one that posed the question? Okay.
We're sitting with it.
I'm tagging you in.
All right, you tagging me? Can you share it one more time?
How do we process the erasure of Black, Mexican, and Afro-Latinos in general within the lens of white supremacy and the Spanish caste system, and how do we fix it? And I would add to that colorism, because that's very real
Absolutely.
in the Latinx community and worldwide.
So my name is Fidel Rodriguez. I work for the Human Relations Commission, part of the team that puts out LA versus Hate for the county. So I'm going to go first and foremost with Frank's narrative, right? There's a saying that says, our narrative is our humanity. And so concerning Mexicans, Blacks, Afro-Mexicans, we are lacking knowledge. We are lacking history. Malcolm said of all of our studies, history is best qualified to reward our research. Currently, we are doing a black and brown mural in Watts on 103rd Street in front of the train station, a 200-foot mural between a Mexican and an African-American who are studying, who are learning about history, who are invoking aspects of our history. So the first president of Mexico was Afro-Mexican.
Yes.
Okay? And so when we start looking, especially for people that are of Mexican descent, we don't know that we got African blood, and Africans were running through Mexico, Filipinos were running through that. Mm-hmm. So this lack of information has been, when we're talking about white supremacy, the public school systems were created to keep us in the bubble, right? They say truth is whole, and any partial approach to truth can't give you anything but an incomplete answer. So what happens when you have no knowledge of self? You self-destruct. You grow up in a situation like Frank did, like I did. We self-destruct. We start using. We start selling. We were sexually abused, physically abused, what have you. We self-destruct because we have no connection to our culture.
Right.
So that's why in Spanish we say la cultura cura. Culture cures. Culture heals. And so I'm hoping that answers the question. It is a long journey to get to this place of dignity, but we have a lot to learn. I'm going to say, as I said in our group, I felt this was very ironic that we were having this discussion with racial fault lines and the origins of white supremacy, being that we are county employees. When the county employees, that's how it started. The county started with white supremacy. 1850, a tradition of excellence. Where is that at? That's on the side of LA County Sheriff's Department, right? The first county jail was set up to incarcerate the Tongva. It's right in front of us. The elephant is in the room, and I want to commend you for doing this discussion. We don't have a quick fix here, but it's a long journey, and if we begin to identify the wound, we begin to heal ourselves, because if we don't heal what first cut us, we will bleed on people that never cut us.
Ooh-wee. Work it out, county family. Work it out, county family. Speaking of, as we all do. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. You know, I'm proud to be a member of the LA County Board of Supervisors for a variety of reasons. One of which, the county requires for county employees implicit bias and cultural competency training, and I completed my training last week. And this slide...
Do you get a certification?
Say it again?
Do you get a certification?
You're going to pat me on my back, Fran. Pat me on my back. There we go. And what struck me was this is one of the slides in terms of, how we build culturally competent organizations. The county is an organization. My team is an organization. We're all an organization here today. And I can't remember which of the links I clicked on the left. It may have been Lead by Example that gave me this description, which for me explains why it's important that we're here and we are participating in racial justice learning exchange. County department heads are my appointees, county commissioners, because that's what the county is charging us to do. And so to provide ongoing learning opportunities. That's why, under the fearless leadership of my chief of staff, we're doing this on a monthly basis, because this is not a one and done situation. We are all having to unlearn the impact of white supremacy on our way of thinking, our way of viewing, our way of feeling healthy or not. fostering new relationships where we can learn and see each other and be seen. And so I'm really proud that a county is trying to do better and charging us and expecting us all as county staff, county commissioners, and constituents to understand what the ultimate goal is. So I'm proud of that. Through the training this last week, I learned this concept of cultural humility. Which, we talk about cultural competence. What does that really mean, to be competent in order to do something? But cultural humility acknowledges that I will likely never fully understand your walk or the walk of someone who is different from me. But if I acknowledge my cultural humility and approach it with an open mind, to acknowledge that we all have bias implicit, that the brain is hardwired to have implicit biases, we can be better by learning and exchanging from other people. So cultural humility is going to be my vocabulary word at the holiday dinner this December, to really try to embrace and educate other people. How do you think, if at all, systemic racism can affect the social determinants of health? This is another example of somebody in the audience who already has the answer and expertise. But any ideas about that?
Say that again, please.
How systemic racism can really impact the conditions that lead to oppressed people not being healthy.
Okay.
Living in communities that have higher incidence of violence, or no grocery stores, or limited access to healthcare services, or are over-policed.
Yeah, and it goes on. When I was growing up, and I know in other people, when we grew, if there was a fight at a high school, it was a fight between two young men or whatever. Now, police are called. Police are called. And especially if it's not in a white school. The police are called. Here goes a kid being taken out of school in handcuffs, and it just starts that same role again and again and again. Like things have, over-policed in the park, that any mistake, they're getting you, right? I mean, one of the scariest things, and one of the things I talk about with a lot of my friends who happen to be of color, is they'll say, like, if they live in Philly, or if they, like, I can't go in this one suburban neighborhood. They're always like that section of a town where I can't go through there. I'm going to get pulled over. Like, we allow that. We allow that. And I think that's one of the things with this generation's coming up, is that we're not allowing it anymore. Right? There's policing for profit that is made mostly off of people of color. The people that are most downtrodden, here they go and they figure out a backdoor tax on every little fine and ticket to get you on. To keep people in the hole.
Right.
And they've been doing it. I mean, it's been, now the conception of the Philadelphia police, not to give, I'm not going to pass, was made by my hero, Ben Franklin. I don't know if you know Ben Franklin, or you know who he is. Abolitionist in the end, made a police department in Philly, the first police department in Philly, to stop robberies and prostitution, because Philly's always been Philly, right? So, all right, and so, like, I noted to the core that this could be a good civil organization. But again, when there's already this bias and this plan of, we don't want them coming in our neighborhood, so how do we stop it? By using the police to be unwelcoming. And that is so prevalent in this country right now. And it's got to change. And we are going to change it. Like, my job and other people's jobs that I know, we're going to change this. And the forgiveness is that, yes, me and my color, like you're saying, my cultural humility. Is that what you're saying?
Cultural humility,
I love it. I love anything with humility in it.
Right.
You know, it's us all standing up for one another right now that's going to start this change. But humility is that I don't think less of myself, but I think about myself less.
Say it again, Frank.
I don't think less of myself, but I think about myself less. And I stand up for others. And I know that if I do the right things, right, if I do the right things to make you comfortable, then he's going to make me comfortable. He's going to make me comfortable. He'll take care of me if I make sure to make my plan to make others around me more comfortable. And I can tell you that when I watch cops, and I'm very active in the cop watching community and all this, because there has to be some changes. And I don't know if you've watched the cop watching community, but it's actually having some change in our policing, and we need to keep doing this, and it's called activism, not terrorism. See, I used to believe in terrorism.
Right.
Let me get my way and get through terror. But it's the First Amendment is all about activism. It's not just freedom of speech. It's freedom to assemble, right? It's freedom to petition my government. Freedom of press, so I can write whatever I want about you. It's all about activism. And if I use that the right way, we're going to have some changes. And we're starting to. We actually are starting to see some changes. So.
I was going to say one last thing you'd want to share with this group. Says you were, quote, activated in a rural area, but talk to us about how you were nurtured to maintain your activism in the white supremacist mentality in the city.
Okay. Oh, wait. Say it again. Say it again. Sorry.
Is that your question? Ask it, please.
So you talk about you were nurtured and activated when you went up to upstate.
Mm-hmm.
But you maintain that mentality for a lot of time. And I don't want people in this room to have this mistaken idea that it only happens in this rural area.
Gotcha.
So talk to me about like how you were able to maintain that white supremacist thinking, being that affiliate in your grandfather area.
No, great. Well, just like LA, but Philly is very diverse from one block to the next block, right? It'll be Puerto Rican, then it's Irish, right? And then it's Italian, and then it's this. So when I had to go back to Philly after I joined the neo-Nazis and was recruiting, and I was a really big recruiter in Philly, was I just used the old neighborhood racism, right? So it was always like, you don't want them coming in your neighborhood, right? Just like we couldn't go in other people's neighborhoods, right? The Irish kids couldn't go in the Italian neighborhood. You can't go in the black neighborhood. Like, so it was very easily, because it's kind of already entrenched that like they suck, we're better, and so I just grabbed onto that and just went with it. Again, I want to say one other thing about the white supremacist movement and all this. It's the biggest bait and switch you ever seen. Because here I would grab a guy who says, I want to be proud of my heritage. How can I be proud of my heritage? Because if I'm, they could say they're proud to be black, but if I say I'm proud to be white, then I'm a racist, right? And this is their argument. This is word for word their argument right now. So I would say to them, yeah, you want to be proud of your heritage? Come join my group. That's what we do. That's what we're about. Come to our group. You'll see. But when you come to our group, we never talk about our heritage. We only talk about you. We talk about how they're messing everything up and they're really messing up my this and you can only talk about Leif Erikson so much, right? You know what I mean? So it's like, it's a whole bait and switch that I want to feel proud in something, but we turn the pride into hate for others. It's the biggest bait and switch in the world is racism. And I used to be really good and not knowing. Again, I want you to know that when I was going through this, I thought I was right, guys. I 100% believe that there should be a race war and that the Timothy McVeighs before Timothy McVeigh, that's the people I was hanging with, that was okay. That was legit. So to foster that neighborhood racism, that, it's just everyone, I'm better than them. I might be really down and out, but I'm not them.
Racism is the biggest bait and switch scheme in the world. That was powerful.
And it's the truth.
Because, quite frankly, the elephant in the middle of the room are the tapes we heard recently by some of my former colleagues, elected leaders. And, what I took away from that was I've engaged in conversations about power and black political power. And that's okay. Where those conversations, from my perspective, took a wrong turn was to assume that you could only talk about power for a particular group at the detriment of another.
Right.
And to really have a very sophomoric view of what power can and should be on behalf of a community as opposed to individual power. And sometimes we as elected officials get confused about why we acquire power. It is to provide services and resources for those who elect us as opposed to self-elevation. And so I appreciate...
Do you think Marjorie Taylor Greene believes that?
I'm I'm not really quite
I'm
sure.
sorry, I
what
shouldn't
she
ask
should
you.
believe.
Yeah, I shouldn't
I'm not
ask you.
sure if she. I'm not. And I mean that. I'm not.
Right.
I'm not sure what she really believes.
I don't know what she
I know
believes
what she espouses, but I don't know what she believes. And maybe that's my own naivete, because I don't want to truly believe that she believes what she says. That might be my own Pollyannish attempt to hold on to humanity for myself. I'm not sure, but I don't know what she believes.
Yeah. And it all goes back to someone else said. It's all about education.
It's about education.
How do we fix North Philadelphia? Just to give it early childhood development now.
Frank, you know you talking my language. Frank, you better stop. Frank said early childhood development. Frank.
I mean, that's what it is. It's the only solution out of this.
Because children aren't born racist. Those are learned behaviors that are taught to them by old people. And so if we can make a commitment, all of us, to try to not raise up the next generation of racists and to teach young people how they can have pride in their own cultural heritage by not negating that of someone who looks different and through cultural humility.
I love it. You know, the one thing is every generation had the generation before them go, oh, that generation, the new generation. When guys were driving around in 57 Chevys with Frank Sinatra, the generation before them said, oh, these new kids. Now they have a news network that gets to keep going with that fear. Like, you've never had that before. Fox News constantly look at what the next generation's coming up. It's all about fear.
Fear.
Fox and Friends in the morning is not very friendly. It's a show that I've been yelling at it for years. It is full of fear. You wake up in the morning and you fear. Like I said, I woke up as a neo-Nazi and thought, why did they get this? I didn't have a news network to go to. People today get to wake up and go, them Democrat, liberals, socialist, communists, wonder what they did to my country. Click. Oh, they're coming.
I must be right, because it's on TV.
Oh, it's coming. I mean, we really have to look at Fox News as hate radio from Rwanda. It's the same deal. The Rwandan hate radio tried to get all the militia and the local officials involved in this plan. I'm telling you right now, if we went back right now and look at the last 10 major police developments where a police officer's gotten in trouble for excessive force, I would love to do a study and see if he is a Fox News viewer or a Trump supporter. I'm serious. We really need to start looking at this because that is radicalizing our police force. People watch Tucker Carlson and they go out on the beat and they take it out on us because they're watching some Tucker Carlson. I was formerly, I had my own cable access show. I like to think that I was Tucker Carlson before Tucker Carlson. And it's really bad. I sound like a little kid. It's really bad that we watch it. No, but it's really bad that we are giving that network, and we have given that network so much play.
Right.
And not saying they're radicalizing us against our own country.
Right.
It's the truth.
Because that is the truth.
It is the truth.
Which led to January 6th and a bunch of stuff. That's why the Racial Justice Learning Exchange is so important. That's why you spending the time reading the books we self-identify. That's why you don't get the privilege of just coming here and learning and having this experience in isolation. You have to go out and tell a friend or 5 or 10. So I want to please give Frank a huge round of applause. I hope that you will go out and get his book. Tell us where we can find the link on your testimony before Congress.
Oh, yeah. You can go on C-SPAN, type in my name, Frank Meeink. You'll see my testimony in front of the United States Congress about neo-Nazi policing and how we need to change it.
And Meeink is M-E-E-I-N-K.
Which is Jewish, by the way. Found out years later. Years and years later.
That part.
Yes.
That part. Thank you to Michelle Ruiz for that amazing historical perspective. I appreciate you. As always, thank you, my county family. Thank Park and Rec. Thanks all of you who came to participate today. And thank Team Mitchell for work tirelessly with coming up with these ideas and doing the work to bring us all together. I appreciate it. I'm going to turn it back over to... my team. Go right ahead. They're going to close us out.
Yes. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Cassie. I'm a proud member of Team Mitchell. Thank you, John. Hi. So we just wanted to, again, thank you all for spending a huge chunk of your afternoons with us. We really appreciate it. Let's give another big round of applause to Frank and Michelle. Thank you for spending so much time with us and really having these difficult conversations. And we know this topic and a lot of the other topics we've discussed throughout the year at these exchanges, they're really difficult, they're really tough, right? So that's why we made it a point to have these grounding activities like the bookmarks. I hope you all colored them in. Thank you. We had our space outside, because it's really important to make sure that while we're having these conversations that are so important to have, that we're also taking care of ourselves, right? Taking care of ourselves and each other. So again, thank you so much for your attention, your vulnerability today. We truly appreciate it. And I'll turn it over to Natalia.
Can we give Cassie a round of applause? And Team Mitchell. So last things last, we do have surveys that you should have received when you walked into the building today. And I know you all love free things. So we have 2 books, the Racial Fault Lines books. And one of them will go to the person who finished their bookmark, which is Lena. She was the first one who threw it up, so we'll give it to her. And then the first person to shoot their hand up with the survey that's completed, if I see a survey go up, you'll get the next book. All right. I don't see the survey, so I'm going to give it to Raphael for his testimony. County family, thank you. And all right, and then just so you all know, next year, of course, we'll have an event for 10 months out of the year, and just want to give you guys general topics that we'll be talking about. In January, we're talking about redlining and homelessness. In February, we're talking about white fragility, deconstructing Karen. In March, that wasn't funny. In March, we're talking about intersection of race, religion, and anti-Semitism. April, housing injustice and urban planning. In May, we're talking about Black and Indigenous reparations. In July/August, we're talking about Black surfers in Los Angeles. In September, we're talking about unincorporation of South Los Angeles, outcomes in history. October, I always get this wrong, Fandongbon? Where's he sell at? Did she leave? Well, you guys will get that email. In November, we're talking about small business food crawls in the district. That'll be fun. And then December is foods and lights, which we love. And I don't know if our chief of staff wants to close this out.
We're going to do a screening of birthing justice, and it's about high maternal death outcomes in the African American community, and we'll have a conversation about that. But we'll also have our other one on redlining as well. Thank you.
And we were going to have an activity, but we ran out of time. So if you have your bookmark, you should have wrote on there an affirmation. And I would hope that you take that affirmation and give it to someone that you do not know in the room and affirm them utilizing that affirmation. And thank you all so much, and we're going to close out. Thank you all.